Hello everyone and welcome back to another Thoth video. And I decided to do just my hands today because I already can foresee we're going to be talking about quite a few more cards than we did the last video. Okay, now as you can see from the description, we're talking about liminality today. Okay, and liminality is the quality of ambiguity. Okay. Now, the definition says it's the middle stage of a rite of passage. Well, I've heard it called a threshold. I've heard it called so many things. But in my opinion, thresholds are that space where, if you think of a threshold of a house, a threshold is like you've got 1 foot inside the house and 1 foot outside of the house. And so, essentially, you're both at the very same time, okay? It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. If anyone's familiar with science. So, in my opinion, thresholds / liminality is everywhere in this deck, okay? And I have a stack of cards over here out of frame that we're going to talk about. But first we're going to talk about these, and it's all court cards, but I'm just going to do discs just for the purpose of this video, just to kind of show you kind of how I think about the court cards. In terms of thresholds / liminality, okay? And like I said when I talked about movement, I believe Crowley chose the way that they are portrayed to tell us a story, and that we're all on a journey. So, like I said in the movement, they're not going to be statues. They're all going to be doing something or in movement, and we're not either starting or in the middle of knowing the journey. We're in a state of both. And when we tap into that knowledge of the deck, it's kind of like when we look at the deck, sometimes we see it in like an archetype way, right? Because I've talked about that before as well. But I believe that some of the archetypes, especially the ones with people, right? So the major arcana and the court cards, they're in a state of transition. Okay, so they're not, like I said, they're not statues. They're very much in some sort of transition between two things. Okay, think of the Fool's Journey, and I'm going to show you an example here with the disc, like I said. But first, I want to say a quote by Carl Jung. Okay, individuation begins with a withdrawal from normal modes of socialization, epitomized by the breakdown of a persona, liminality. So, according to Jung, the individuation process starts when we go inward for answers instead for the ones in our relationships, and then once we go in, we have to let go of our ego. Crowley may be trying to tell us something along those lines as well. So we break down the ego, find the answers that are in the cards and in your heart. And, okay, so let's get started. Now, I very much believe that the knights are the main, we're going to talk about the knights mainly, okay? But I pulled all 4 of these so that we can kind of see how I think about the knights in transition. Now, the big question that everyone has is, why did Crowley put the knight here and then a prince here, okay, instead of the king? And I won't even go right now into why he doesn't have a page, okay, because I think I said that in another video. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to talk about the knights and then how all these cards kind of transition between all of them, okay? States, and I'm going to quote here, "The reason for this confusion is connected with the doctrine of the fool, who wins the king's daughter. These are abstract ideas of the king, queen, prince, and princess, because the king's wise plan of choosing the successor to be the king by his ability to win the princess from all competitors." Okay, so if you think of it, the king would be a knight if he's trying to win the princess, right? So therefore, the knights wouldn't be, he's both the princess's father and like the competitor to win her heart all at the same time. That's how I interpreted that, okay? So he is essentially both. And he sits in a state of liminality, caught between being the fool, aka the competitor here, and the king all in one card. Now, I'm going to explain this visually, okay? So say, here's the king, okay? He starts as the king. Then, he gets with the queen, okay? Or these are just the dynamic duo, the beginning, right? They have children, twins, so the Book of Thoth says, okay? A prince and a princess. Then, okay, then these kind of go over here, right? They kind of go over here. Then we have these two. Now, essentially, they're in a place of transition as well. Because what does the prince have to do? The prince now has to become a competitor. So he essentially becomes the knight. And the princess, what is her job? Once he becomes the knight, she becomes the queen. Okay? I'll go over that one more time. I believe, this is my opinion, folks, liminality speaking, all of these cards are in a state of both the knight and the king, the princess and the queen, the prince and the knight in this card all rolled into one, and the princess and the queen all rolled into one. Now, I think that that's fascinating because the Book of Thoth really goes in, it doesn't go too in-depth with this, but the way I really interpreted the paragraphs, all of the paragraphs on the court cards, I do believe that he would be the knight then. If he's the suitor, even if he's the suitor / king in this card alone, then of course he would be wearing armor. Because either, if he's the knight, he will be competing, so he's got to have armor there. And then if he's the king, he's going to have army there because he's going to be commanding armies, right? So all 4 of these cards are essentially all 4 of these cards. And that right there is a threshold. They're both standing on this knife edge, this precipice, waiting to be a king, waiting to be a queen, okay? Waiting to birth the children, then he becomes the knight, and then she becomes the princess. And I think taking the fact that they're related out, take that out, okay? I never liked that anyway. Okay. That was fascinating, right? Let's put these away. And I'm going to go through the cards that I have in a minute, okay? I want to say one more thing about the court cards, okay? The reason I feel, again, about the court cards being liminal is that we're all it's like a wheel. It's like a cycle. And it begins with the knight / king. It has to, okay? Because it's kind of like the equation, which came first, the chicken or the egg, okay? Well, Crowley put the knight and the king starting the cycle. But then once the cycle is started, you really don't have a place of origin anymore, okay? So I just believe that is, again, like I keep saying, I think that's fascinating. Okay. Here's the Fool, okay? Now, we talked about the Fool in another video, okay? But let's talk about this in terms of liminality. According to the Book of Thoth, it is the equation of the universe, the infinite and final balance of the opposites. So he's both the universe itself and the start of it, all in one card. If you watched the Sacred Geometry video, he would probably be the point. He'd be the start of everything. But in terms of creation, okay, it had to start somewhere. So he's essentially, like I said in the last Thoth video, dawning from space. Therefore, he's neither space nor the start of it. He's just kind of in the cycle, right? So, let's move on, because we could talk about this all day. Okay. The Wheel of Fortune. Well, Crowley just calls this the fortune card. But I believe that there's liminality in here because just for the simple fact that it is a will, okay? A cycle. We could either start or end in any of these points, okay? And I think that all the symbolism back here is fascinating because he calls these light shards up here, he calls them, these are the archangel trumpets, so to speak, okay? And they're shining down, and they're kind of shining on this wheel. It's kind of like an activation process, but we're not going to go into that right now. And I want to quote again from the Book of Thoth on what this card says. Nothing can remain in any phase where one of these is predominant, one of these spokes, okay? The end reward, the end/reward of the effort is a state of lucid quietude. But this card, like the Tower, can be interpreted as a unity of supreme attainment and delight. The lightning which destroys also begets. So it's saying that this lightning right here is essentially starting and ending the wheel. If you think of this in terms of like Greek mythology, this card would be, in my opinion, I very much see the fates here. Okay? They're pulling the string, and then the one sister pulls the string and the other sister just cuts it, right? I mean, there's three, but like I said, we're not going to get into all that right now. Okay? But it's in a state of both. As the wheel, it's in a state of both. And I just thought that was fascinating. Moving on. This is the Justest. Okay? He calls this adjustment, which I think is a great word for this. Again, like I said in the last video, we could cut these words off and just put our own on here. But for the sake of this video, we're starting out, right? So I can see a space of liminality here because of she's standing on this knife edge, right? She's standing on this circle. There's a whole bunch of light and darkness because she's balancing both, so to speak, in this. And I believe that with this shape alone, there is a middle point. There's a middle point, and she's standing on it. And she's standing right on her own knife edge, okay? And it's like, this perfect balance, right? So the Book of Thoth says that all things are harmony and beauty, and then all things are truth because carried out. So she represents manifestation, okay? And we learned about the star card the last video, that she's also manifestation. But the star was fluid. Remember I said she was kind of a fairy, like a will-o-wisp coming out of the ground. And adjustment, look at her. There's no fluidity here. She is resolute. She is standing here resolute, okay? Essentially, like I said, I don't think Crowley likes to use statue, but for the purpose of this card, I think that was almost necessary, and he knew that, okay? And, okay, so let me get back to the quote. Manifestation which may be concealed out or canceled out by the equilibration of opposites. So she is resolute, calculation of opposites. Tall, so she's both of whatever it is. She literally, essentially becomes both of whatever is in these two bowls here, okay, in this scale. She has to become both to be able to see which one's heavier and which one's lighter. Otherwise, she won't know. And so in this card specifically, she kind of embodies both. So she's in a state of liminality here because she's neither one of the other. Herself is both of whatever these two things are in order to figure out the balance. Okay. This is fascinating, you guys. Okay. Now this is the art card, which is, I guess in every other deck, the Temperance card, right? Now, all these things that look ingrained with one another, okay, you can already tell. They're two things at the same time. And they've been mixed together, okay? Just like in alchemy, this is very much an alchemical card in my opinion. Well, it definitely is because of all the things happening in the cauldron down here. But all these things that look ingrained with one another, they are effectively each other, and the other is, and like vice versa. So this is the fulfillment of what was the Lover's card. So if you think about this in terms of astrology, the Lover's card is the Gemini, effectively the twins, right? But then this would be the opposite of that. So this was Sagittarius, okay? And is the consummation of the Lovers, but we see the mixture here, like with this lion and this eagle. In the Lover's card, the eagle is red and the eagle is white and the lion is red. And so they've mixed colors. These have essentially, they've become one another. They've changed faces, and then it's like they've done this to one another. Okay? Now, the Book of Thoth says that the fire in the cauldron burns up the water, and then the water extinguishes the fire. Well, if that's not a state of liminality, I don't know what is. Okay. This state of the great work therefore consisted in the mingling of the contradictory elements in the cauldron. Right here. So he's saying alchemically they've mixed the two. Okay, look at this rainbow, and it's become one rainbow, and they're mixing fire and water, but it's together. Okay, it's done this. The fire extinguishes the water, and the water extinguishes the fire, and it's just both at the same time. Fascinating. Okay. Now, we haven't looked at any minor arcana cards, okay? And I'm going to look at 2 minor arcana cards from each suit. And I really want to look at these in terms of liminality, okay? So that's what we're going to do here. And we're going to start with the wands. Okay, here's the 4 of wands. Well, that looks like wheel, doesn't it? And we already said the wheel is like a cycle. So, essentially being both, like intersecting. Essentially being both at the same time. Now, as you can see, the 4 wands here are intersecting. Now, they're equipped each with a ram head and a dove of Venus. Each wand is, okay? So, in my opinion, that would be the wands in this particular card are both the fire of Aries and the dove of Venus, which is love. This card is war and peace right in this card. Like all's fair in love and war, that's this card right here. The completion we feel, right? This is the fight that you have with your loved one, and then you still love them at the other side of it. Okay, like that's how I kind of think of it. And the 7 of wands, right? Now, I'm not looking at this in terms of numerology, okay? Because we could really, really go off of just numbers alone. But I've only looked at like my interpretations of the card, and I tried to pick cards that, in my opinion, showed a state of knife edge, okay? Being both, so to speak. So with this card, it's called Valor, which means courage in the face of danger, right? And if you think of the 7 of wands, it's kind of like a fight, right? But in this particular card, Crowley says that this is a battle or a bad situation, but that's already underway. So effectively, the soldier, which is you've been fighting this battle right here. These 6 behind this 1, you're already in the fight. So you are already a soldier. Okay, so here you are as a soldier. And you've been fighting with this issue. But then all of a sudden, in the chaos that is the fight itself, you find your courage. Okay? So you're fighting. You know that moment in a film where the hero looks up and all of a sudden he's like, he just becomes emboldened, right? It's that state right there. You're already in the fight, but then the fight just seems to go on and on and on. But then all of a sudden, it's like you look up and you realize I'm fighting for something and I have to keep going. So essentially, you're both at the same time with this card. You're essentially in the fight, okay? You have all of the tools you need, and you've got all this fire, right? And you're pushing the fire out. But then all of a sudden, this 1 wand, it just becomes emboldened, and you find your courage, and then you just, and then before you know it, the fight scene in that movie is over, because he's gone crazy with his fire, okay? And that's how I think about this card. So he's both the loss of confidence and the valor all in one card. And I thought that was a fascinating way to look at the 7 of wands. And a lot of these are they put, and like I said in the last video, I really like to look at tarot, not just face value. I really like to dive with tarot. And in readings, I tend to just kind of go with the flow and see where my mind takes me with it. But then upon studying, actual study, I can find so much more out. And then it does so much to my readings. It's not even funny. Okay. Now this is the 9 and 10 of Cups. Now the 9 of Cups here, that's just called happiness. But it's not straight happiness, okay? Because this would be the Sun card. The Book of Thoth says, true wisdom, self-fulfilled in perfect happiness. So to me, this is that moment when you have an aha moment, okay? So this is an aha moment. Now the Cups is emotions, right? And, well, I think. And working with your emotions and that moment, the stuff clicks in your brain and that feeling you get with that happiness you get with that aha moment, maybe that has nothing to do with liminality. I don't know. But I just thought that this is happiness with your emotions, like that split second between not knowing if what you feel is the right feeling and feeling that it's right in your heart. I think it's both of those at the same time. And that's kind of how I thought about that. Now look at this beautiful, beautiful 10 of Cups here. I mean, this lotus flower in the back and then this tree of life down here is just, I love this card. Now this is called satiety, okay, which we'll say this is the card that's called being satisfied, okay? And it's a completion with the need of disruption. So as this is a completion, okay, in the Cups, all this water is coming down, okay? But this isn't the end, right? We think of, I think of as the 10s as that turning point. It's the end and the beginning all in one. Again, we're not talking numerology here, people, because we could be here all day. But for the purpose that I did pick this 10 for the Cups, I want to stress that 10s are that state of being the ending and the beginning all in one card. And I believe that Crowley, when he stated that it was, it's completion with the need of disruption. So, I'm going to quote from the Book of Thoth again. Mars is the gross, violent, disruptive force which inevitably attacks energy, supposed perfection. So this is perfection and disturbance all at once. Turn the page here. So that's what this is saying. You have all these cups, right? And look at all this water. It's coming down, right? But it needs to be disrupted. Okay? They're not even overflowing, but there's just too much going on. Or they are overflowing, but they're not overflowing into this cup. They're not, it's like too much water. So you kind of need to shake things up and pour something out. Or just kind of, it's being satisfied. Okay, think of it in this way. It might be that moment where you're really satisfied, or you think you are, and you've been fighting for this, and you think you're going to be satisfied, but then when you get it, when you get whatever it is you've been wanting or whatever, it doesn't feel satisfactory. You're like, damn, I've been working all this time and it doesn't even feel like I got anything. That feeling right there, because you want to keep doing the work, but it's disruption in that sense. Okay. Swords. Oh my God, I love these cards. Ooh. Okay. Now, the Seven of Swords. He names this card futility. Okay, which is pointlessness. Well, that's interesting because we do think of this, because the sevens are what? That's like that fight, right? Like, not like the fives, this is different, but I feel like this is a mental fight. So simultaneously, your 6 feeble minds here, okay, this is your feeble-mindedness right here in these 6 cards. And they go against these 6 right here. They're going against this, which is your strong mind. So this is that thought that you have that's both at the same time. You're like, oh, you're doubting it, and it's that one thing that you're thinking about that you're doubting, right? And that's just making you make-minded. But then this comes in, right? This is the sun too, so that's blasting. And he calls it pointlessness because he says it's pointless to fight with yourself. It's like basically just let it go and be you. Whatever thought dominating at the time, that should be the thought you go with. Okay? And I kind of think of it in that way. Well, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Okay. Let's move on. Look at this card right here. This looks like cruel and unusual punishment all in one card. And the Book of Thoth says that this is the world of the unconscious primitive instinct of the psychopath and the fanatic. Ooh, so this sounds like the shadow card. All this crap, right, in your shadow that's just cutting you, and you've shoved and shoved and shoved down there on an unconscious level, folks, okay? But it's just, if you don't do the work, you're just going to bleed out, right? Think about that for a second. Okay, so, and I want to stress that I interpret this as that place mentally where you're hungry for more and operating with the restraint at the same time. So if he calls this an instinct, okay, let's not look in terms of shadow right now. He called this the primitive instinct, right? So these are the instincts that even maybe on a conscious level, you don't want to bring out, okay? So say you are really, it's kind of like a morality card if you think about it. If you're hungry for something, okay, and he kind of, we'll go into sex magic a little bit. The example he used was if you're hungry in lust with someone. Well, you're not just going to go and force it on them, are you? So it's that space of liminality where you're hungry for them, lustful for them, but you're restraining yourself because I can't just go over there and take it, so to speak, okay? So that's kind of the example he used in the Book of Thoth. Now, we must refrain from talking about that right there, so let's move on. But space of liminality being both hunger and restraint all in one, okay? Last two. Okay, now we know what this is. The Ouroboros, right? Within this Limnascot, okay, because it means infinity, right? The constant battle between these two pentacles, so to speak. And he says that the figure 8 symbolizes infinity, which we usually all know, but he says that this is the equation, mathematical equation, 0 equals 2. So this, to me, is kind of like the Fool card, right? If you think about the Fool card, it being both at the same time, right? He's both the universe and the start and the beginning of the universe all in one card. But this, because it's the disc, it's about work, right? It's about the stuff you're doing is your day-to-day life, right? So this is your plane of Earth existence. So in terms of just liminality, I was comparing it to the Fool, but the Fool is the universe and the start of it all in one card. But then this, we're bringing it back down. This is the microcosm here, right? And I'll talk more about that in this card. But so one wheel, he said, is dextro, which means to the right, and then the other one is lexo, which is to the left. But the serpent here means that it is moving right and left all at the same time. So we have no idea. It's just doing this, okay? So it is essentially a wheel. And if you were to look at a snake doing this in real life, you wouldn't be able to tell which part of the body is which, because he's slithering in such a way that it's just fluid, right? And his scales are doing this, and you won't be able to tell, okay? You could be right there at his head, or you could be at his tail. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference because of the fluidity that is his scales, okay? And so I believe that this is, whatever these two pentacles are that you're battling in your day-to-day life, they're the same thing, all in one, okay? Yeah, let's just go put that over here. Last card. Okay, this is the 10. Again, I could talk about the 10s. We could talk about this in terms of numerology here, where they're both the completion of the suit and the start of the suit all in one card. But I want to say yet another quote, okay? I love quoting from the Book of Thoth here because I really want to give you some information, not just my interpretations, okay? I really want to teach you some stuff. So it says that the symbol of uniting of the microcosm and the macrocosm is the accomplishment of all of the work. Okay, so all these coins are essentially the work that you're doing for the universe, the work that you're doing for yourself, and the work you're doing for your community. So this is universe. Think of Tai Chi. Okay, you're up in the sky and then you're down at the ground as well, and you have to have both. Okay. Well, let's not get into that right now. So if this is both the macrocosm of your work, right, the work that you do and the rewards, okay, so essentially the work that you're doing for the universe and for your earthly plane, okay, so your home, your family, your community, but then also the rewards will come from the macro and the microcosm as well. And that's kind of what this wealth, this is wealth from everything, both macro and microcosm all in one. So you're doing the work, okay? And the work you do is also it's coming from both, right? Again, we're talking Tai Chi here, okay? If you think about Tai Chi, it's a line here and a line here and some lines in here to make up this Chinese symbol. But essentially, you reach up to the sky and then you reach the ground and then everything in between. And it's just like you're stretching like a tree. Okay, I watched an interesting TED Talk about that. And I thought, when I thought about this card and how he talked about the work you put in, okay, this is the work you put in. It's coming, you're doing the work for self, soul, community, house, whatever. And then alongside that, you can't forget to do work that will come this way, up and out. And then once you do that, the work then comes back to self, home, community, whatever, and back to the universe. So it's both at the same time. Your wealth, and then you're giving the wealth back up to the universe. So I thought that was a great way to look at that in terms of liminality. Okay. Now, that's all the cards I wanted to go over today. I hope that this was fun, and I hope that it was informative, because I really like to look at this deck. You know, I don't want to just plug in interpretations and y'all be like, well, we could have done that, right? So I'm thinking outside of the box here, and I want to continue to do that with this deck because I'm learning a lot, and I do very much use this as a study tool, not just a reading tool, because like that 10 of coins, I want to do the work, and I want my work to come to ground and to sky, and so that I'm going to be gaining those rewards as well and be both at the same time. And that's, I believe, what wealth in life is. And so I hope all of you have a good day.